This conference today. Others are the Institute, the Institute for Democracy. The President, Guillermo Gusto, is here and will speak. He actually will moderate a panel later. The Heritage Foundation, Capitol Hill Cubans, whose director, Mauricio Clavecaroni, will also speak later. And other very important groups that I've left out and I will hear from, I'm sure, later. First, I want to thank the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the Honorable Ross Lebanon, Leanna, to her friends and constituents for making this room available, all facilities that we are using today. The conference was really a natural outgrowth of what has been happening in the hemisphere lately. And that is that a number of governments that some pretend to be democratic, others make no such pretense, have decided to attack the press as one way to remain in power as indefinitely as possible. This is nothing new. Many years ago, 4 years ago, I took my master's degree at Georgetown University, and I wrote my thesis on the takeover of Cuba by Fidel Castro. And I studied other similar takeovers all over the world, previous ones, Russia, Germany, Italy, China. And there is a pattern that is followed by totalitarians when they are intent on taking over a country. And by taking over, I mean controlling it in its totality, or at least as much as they can get away with. And that is that they attack the press and labor unions, interestingly. Now, labor unions have changed a great deal in 100 years. But those two institutions of the democracy usually serve as an obstacle to dictatorship. We saw in Cuba, where some of the heads of the labor unions were executed by Fidel Castro, and most of the press, the editors, the publishers, and the reporters were either exiled or jailed or worse. We were seeing it in Venezuela, where, for example, my friend Carlos Ortega, who was the head of the labor union, the Venezuelan Confederation of Workers, has been jailed, exiled, and threatened, and he is now, of course, outside of the country, where the main radio, television, and newspapers are being either intimidated or run out of business, or in other ways neutralized so that the people cannot obtain access to information. We're going to address those topics today. We're not going to limit it to countries on the left side of the political spectrum, like Cuba and Venezuela. I happen to believe that no dictatorship is good for its people or for the hemisphere or for the United States. And if anybody in this hemisphere who calls himself left, right, center, or something else is attempting to muzzle the press, I hope they realize that they have in the United States a group of friends who will help them, at least to tell their story. So we will hear today from people as far away as Argentina who feel that this is happening in their country, and others. I have to tell you that this would have been a much larger conference if we had had the resources to invite reporters from the countries that contacted us. We had a number, once we announced the conference, we had a number of people from countries that you can think of and countries that you may not think of in this hemisphere saying, why aren't you including us, name of country? And I said, well, we're a small group, we're volunteers, and we don't have money to bring you and put you up in these incredibly expensive hotels in Washington, D.C. So because the World Bank and the IMF meetings were last weekend, and they were squeezing those money lenders for what they were worth. But the fact is that we could have made this a day-long conference and had representatives from all over, from many more countries, frankly, than we'd like to admit. So this, we could say, is the first of what will probably be a series on press freedom in the hemisphere, and certainly not the last. We're very lucky to have, to open the conference, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I've introduced her so many times that I'm at a loss for words. What can I say? The first woman elected representative from the state of Florida, I believe the first Hispanic woman elected to the Congress, the chairman of one of the most important committees in the Congress of the United States, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, a great representative of the people of Florida, of the Cuban American community from whence she came, and I came. Proud of that. It's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Ileana Rostovich.
Muchísimas gracias a todos, muchas gracias por esa introducción, pero es verdad, hemos estado en tantos foros y tantos muchas gracias, buenos días y bienvenidos a este nuestro salón de nuestro Comité de Relaciones Exteriores, así que es el salón suyo también, porque this is the people's house. But thank you each and every one of you for being here today. We have a World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd, coming up just in a few days, and that's a day that we should celebrate, and we thank the journalists who cover their stories day in and day out, and do so sometimes under very difficult circumstances. And but in some countries, lamentably, it's just going to be another day of repression and oppression, and we're reminded on that day, as we should remember every day, of the deterioration of press freedom in our hemisphere and increasing attacks against freedom of expression by repressive leaders in the region. For too many journalists in Latin America, the rights that we sometimes take for granted here in the United States are but a bold and abstract concept. Right here in this committee, in this very room, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the members of the committee all sit here and they exercise those freedoms every day. We have spirited debates on foreign policy without the fear of intimidation, imprisonment, or other reprisals. And committee hearings are broadcast over the web every day, and sometimes televised for the American public as well on C-SPAN. And U.S. and foreign media also are invited to be in the rooms and report on these proceedings without any fear whatsoever. And just today, this morning, before coming in here in the hallway, there was the press asking about the issues of the day. Unfortunately, they did not cover this forum. They wanted to know about the Secret Service scandal in Colombia, but that is their right to do so. They decide what is their story for that day, and I wish that they would pay a little more attention to what's going on here and the things that we're going to be talking about here, because I think that's an even bigger scandal, because that's depriving people of their rights to free press. But there are so many regimes in our very own hemisphere that are attacked by the rulers. They attack the press, and it's the responsibility of every freedom advocate to bring to light these clear violations of human rights. And one might ask, why would a government attack the press? Well, because we know information is power, and it empowers those who struggle against those dictatorial leaders. And they are so insecure in their positions that they don't want the press to be investigating them. But thanks to technological advances, the media have the power to report information in real time and distribute it quickly through the internet, through smartphones, through social media sites. Lamentably, in my place of birth in Cuba, we don't have any of those social sites. So it's a far different scenario that of hostility that the independent press, what little there is in Cuba, have to face. But tyrannical regimes attack the press so that these thugs can control and distort the information displayed to the people. With that control, they disguise their power grabs, they promote government propaganda, which is based on fictitious information. They hide the truth from the people and the international community. Earlier this week, the Inter-American Press Association said, and I quote, "The main problems facing the press in the Americas are crimes against journalists for the sole fact that they are performing their work under governments of democratic origin, but which are authoritarian and use state-controlled media to persecute and defame the independent ones." And that goes right to the heart of what this forum this morning is all about. Some of these governments may have originally been democratically elected, but governing democratically, they are not. On the contrary, they are undertaking any and all steps to gain absolute power. So what is the first target that they must eliminate? The free press. The power to spread information was critical during the time of the Arab Spring. Many tyrants in the Middle East and North Africa were toppled by demonstrators and protests by civil society, organized through social media tools. So the tyrants in Latin America fear the same outcome. They worry that that can occur in their countries, and so they remain afraid of an active, well-organized citizenry that is advocating for freedom. The uprisings during the Arab Spring gained more traction thanks in part to the robust international media coverage. The media and the Arab Spring uprising, they were one and the same, one fueled the other. And unfortunately, we lack the same exposure focusing on Latin America. Not many people are aware of the dismal press conditions because the media have shifted their attention elsewhere and have failed to closely monitor developments of our very own hemisphere. Cuba, for example, sadly continues to be the model for an authoritarian state, cracking down on any whose opinions may differ from that of the Castro regime. According to the 2010 U.S. State Department Country Human Rights Report, Cuban citizens caught criticizing the regime's leaders or distributing anti-government materials can receive up to 15 years imprisonment. During the Pope's visit, what did the regime do? It shut down the cell phones of opposition leaders in order to restrict the access of communication on the island and with the island with the outside world. Reports indicate that over 1,100 dissidents were detained solely in the month of March by the Cuban authorities in one of the most widespread crackdowns in decades. So much for the reforms and change in Cuba. In Cuba, even the foreign press is under surveillance. Any journalist from the foreign press who dares to report on the crimes, the atrocities that are committed against dissidents and opposition leaders is immediately expelled out of the island or imprisoned. Similarly, Venezuela's Hugo Chavez has brazenly declared war on the press and war on free speech by imposing strict regulations and fines on the media or any person with conflicting views of the Venezuelan regime. Globovisión, Venezuela's TV station, was fined more than $2 million for its coverage of the deadly prison riots last June and July. More recently, Globovisión journalists came under fire from assailants wearing red shirts associated with supporters of Hugo Chavez while covering an opposition rally. In Ecuador, the directors of El Universo were charged with defamation of character by Rafael Correa after they reported that Correa's brother had obtained $600 million in state contracts. Under the law in Ecuador, presidential family members are prohibited from using their relationship for economic gain. Nicaraguan despot Daniel Ortega, no slouch when it comes to attacking the press. He continues to forcibly harass private media organizations and journalists, as well as closely monitoring the email accounts of several NGOs, non-governmental organizations, firms in the country. In addition, Ortega tried to block the newspaper La Prensa from distributing its newspapers to the Nicaraguan people. In Argentina, the ongoing battle between President Kirchner and two of Argentina's largest newspapers, Clarín and La Nación, persists. Kirchner attempted to manipulate the distribution of official advertising to reward those who report positively about her policies and punish media outlets that are critical of her government. And that's one of the perks of office, which they use then for their own propaganda. Her attempt to silence the media and independent economists from highlighting information regarding Argentina's economic conditions demonstrates Kirchner's willingness to use intimidation tactics to stifle her critics. Then there is Evo Morales, Bolivia's repressive ruler, who in response to a journalist's question stated, and I quote, "The largest and the greatest opposition to this government are the journalists." Well done. Just last month, a journalist in Bolivia writing about government corruption in the country was found guilty of defamation by a criminal court and sentenced to 30 months in prison. All of these regimes use the same playbook of threatening journalists and the press to prevent their own people and the outside world from finding out the ongoing abuses of power. It is crucial then that we raise awareness and continue fighting for freedom of speech and the press be recognized as universally recognized human rights. Freedom of the press is for all and everyone. Throughout the conference today, we will hear from experts from some of these countries, many of whom are victims of the same persecution and harassment that I have been discussing. So all of us, as supporters of democracy and freedom and human rights, all of us are gathered here to advocate to those whose voices are being silenced by the tyrants of Latin America. We must remain vigilant. We must stand in solidarity on the side of liberty and on the side of freedom. Así que yo le doy las gracias a mi amigo Ray, le doy las gracias a todas las personas que han patrocinado este evento. Este foro es de mucha importancia, porque todos los días la prensa están atacando a los periodistas, la prensa libre está bajo ataques, y nosotros le tenemos que dar ese micrófono a las personas que se lo quitan, y le tenemos que dar la voz a las personas que pierden su voz, porque estos dictadores tratan de controlar todo. Así que el tema del foro hoy es de mucha importancia, y ojalá que en estos próximos días, cuando vamos a celebrar el Día Internacional de la Prensa Libre, debemos recordar y ayudar a la prensa en esos lugares donde no tienen voz, no tienen micrófono y piensan que nadie lo está escuchando. Nosotros sí lo estamos escuchando. Así que muchas gracias y muy agradecido. We wanted to continue to ask about the prostitution scandal. I'll be right back again. We'll try it. We'll come on.
Thank you very much. And by the way, los que no hablan inglés, afuera hay equipo para traducción. Me olvidó mencionarlo, pero es gratis. Así que que me entienda, por favor. Or, those of you who does not speak Spanish, some of the presentations will be in Spanish. There is translation right outside on the table. So please get the earphones and translation computer now for your benefit. Okay. If I can ask those who are on la persona que está en el primer panel, por favor, que se acerquen a la mesa. El presidente del Estado y más.